Let's start with the foreword of this book, which is written by Dr. Norman Deutsch, who is also the author of The Brain That Changes Itself. Perhaps someday we'll also cover this book on this channel. Now, he has stated that our brains are plastic in his foreword. So, how can we make this generalization that a few rules can be helpful to all of us? Because the plasticity of our brain means that all of us have had different lived experiences, different realities, different upbringing, different education. So, how can few generalized rules be beneficial to all of our interests? Then he gives us the example of the 10 commandment of Moses, right? He tells us that if we choose to completely be a free agent, we become slaves to our passion rather than actually focusing on our goals or actually focusing on living a life worth living. Because he further elucidates this point by telling us that the best of the rules do not restrict our freedom, but they facilitate us in achieving our goals, in achieving a good quality life, in increasing the happiness and satisfaction in our overall life. Then he tells us how he met Jordan Peterson at a particular party, and then he interacted with him, and he tells us about Jordan Peterson and how Jordan Peterson interacted. In the way Jordan Peterson spoke, he gave practical examples, and he was not like other academics or other intellectuals who did not like being challenged in their ideas or being corrected. Jordan Peterson was someone who liked being challenged, and he often corrected himself while he was thinking, or if there was an aspect he overlooked, he often went back to that aspect and corrected himself. He was not someone like many academics who do not accept their faults. He was ready to correct himself and even improve uh, in his certain faults. Apart from being part of the research oriented department of psychology of the Toronto University, Jordan Peterson was the only outlier who also kept a clinical practice. Hence, apart from having a research oriented knowledge in the department of psychology in which he was a part of, he also had a lot of practical experience because he was a clinical practitioner in this regard. Before writing the 12 rules for life, Jordan Peterson wrote another book, which was his first and only book, Maps of Meaning. In Maps of Meaning, Jordan Peterson wrote about his insights on universal themes of world mythology, and he cited various works of various different scholars and psychologists and philosophers in this particular books. He told us in this particular book, Maps of Meanings, that all cultures have created their own story to basically give you a kind of a framework as to what are the challenges that you can possibly face in your life. And all of these cultures and their stories have certain similarities attached to them. And if you follow these stories closely, you will understand how you can live a better quality life and why these stories have, survived the test of time. Then the author also tells us that Jordan Peterson was deeply affected about what all happened with Jews during Nazism, and henceforth henceforth Norman also cautions the readers to be most wary of ideology, because Nazism was also an ideology, communism was also an ideology, and Jordan Peterson has also studied how simply because of ideology people were ready to destroy each other during the Cold War era and other such things. Now, Norman has also gone through a lot of lectures of Jordan Peterson, and in his lectures, Jordan Peterson creates a fabulous link between evolution, brain, and religion. And he uses stories of a triumphant hero, which is a hero that has to go through a difficult journey and complete all of his challenges to get the final reward. And during his journey, a part of him dies for new parts to give way. So a part of his negative traits perhaps have to die to give part to certain positives. He has to be reborn to complete his journey and hence become a triumphant hero. Jordan Peterson also has in his lecture talks about how life is suffering, and one thing which binds all of us humans together is the fact that we all suffer in some way or another. Even if, let's say, we are not suffering right now, chances are that we will suffer at some point or another. And not talking about this fact that life is suffering will not make the suffering less painful. Rather, if we have the practical wisdom of certain psychologists, philosophers, or adults, or through other books, perhaps we'll be able to better chalk out a path to come out of this suffering. But then he tells us that the rules are important because alongside our desire to be free of rules, we also look for a certain structure to give us a kind of a path to live a better life, because a life completely devoid of rules is simply complete and utter chaos. The next In the next section of the foreword, we'll discuss about two contrasting ideas which are taught to millennials, and what are virtues.